So the 22 ARC got my attention, like a lot of people, when it was released this last winter, with the punchline being, 22-250 like performance out of a standard AR-15 length cartridge. So it's basically a neck down 6.5 Grendel, which wildcatters have been messing around with for a while, but now standardized. You can use AR-15 length receivers and all this. And like a lot of other modern cartridges, it's designed around shooting heavy for caliber, like hot, very efficient bullets. Now, I didn't know really what to think of it or have high expectations for it. My thoughts were initially, it's just kind of like a hog and varmint rifle round. So I wanted to cover it regardless, and it took me a few months, but I built two different AR-15s in the 22 ARC, a 20-inch barrel and an 18-inch barrel model. And so where it really clicked for me was I was out shooting at distance one day at like a 10-12 mile an hour crosswind, pretty brisk. I was shooting Hornady's black factory 75 grain ELD-M loads, which isn't even the most efficient bullet for the 22 ARC. But I'm out there and I'm shooting it at 1,000 yards alongside a 6.5 Creedmoor with 140 grain Sierra Match Kings. And in a 10-12 mile an hour crosswind, I was getting exactly the same wind drift and a flatter trajectory than the 6.5 with those 75s. And that got my attention. Because, a classic drawback of some of these 22 cals, like a 223 or a 22-250, because the bullets are so light, is you give up so much wind drift. Even if you get the velocity, you give up so much wind drift that, I maybe thought about them for big game, but it never really, it was never really worth giving up the wind. That kind of like clicked a light bulb on, and I start looking at the the variety of bullets that you could use in a 22 ARC. And as far as weight and velocity and ballistics, they're not that far off, in some ways better than like a 243 or, even in some ways like pushing up to 25-06 with some metrics. So what I see in my mind is this cartridge can potentially take over some of the roles or fill some of the same roles as many of these older like crossover varmint big game cartridges. My biggest thought with the 22 ARC, when I can see, you can shoot 80 grain bullets, 88 grain bullets, is for a sheep rifle. Now, I'm a pretty passionate sheep hunter, and like sheep are not tough to kill. It doesn't take a big gun. 243 is an excellent option. And I've been shooting them with 6.5s for quite a while and 25-06. But what if I could get the same, my thought is, what if I can get pretty comparable, terminal performance, ballistic performance, but no recoil? And that to me is a big advantage on stuff like that. So that kind of got the wheels turning for me. Now, the next season I had coming, sheep season's over at this point. By the time I still don't have a bolt action rifle set up in it, but my next season coming up was moose, and I've been like relentlessly bugging people who are shooting, both 22 Wildcats and the 22 ARC and 22 Creedmoor about what these bullets are doing. And I had this, had it in my brain to maybe take it moose hunting, but there's like a certain uneasiness that I think is programmed into us from like non-stop multi-generational dogma of you have to shoot a bigger cartridge, you have to shoot a bigger cartridge. And not all of that is experience based. So I plugged guys that went to Africa and used in particular these 88 grain Hornady ELD match bullets in Africa on plains game, had really good results. And I got a buddy in BC that has been using the 88 grain ELD match and a 22 Ackley improved, basically giving him the exact same velocity I'm getting out of this gas gun. And he's shot several moose and elk with it, and all with like really good results. So based on that, I felt totally confident that the bullet would do the job. The bullet would do the damage in the animal to kill it quickly and cleanly. I just need to be careful and conscientious of how I use it. So basically at that point, I was taking it moose hunting, and that's how it was going to be. When I decided to shoot a moose with a 22 arc, I kind of anticipated definitely some skepticism, and I'm sure some pushback. But I think it's important to consider like the context of actually killing moose. Like, what does it take to kill a moose? And moose are not very tough to kill. I mean, I've killed them with a 243, 25-06, no problem. The key is just using a bullet that will do sufficient damage. I mean, you punch a decent sized hole through a moose's lungs, he's not going to live very long. He's not going to go far. I mean, bows and arrows work great. So that's just something to keep in mind. Because they're so big, people sometimes tend to think, especially people that haven't shot a lot of them, tend to think that you need something huge to kill them. And it's just not the case. There's so much FUD lore and systematically ingrained bad information that a lot of times people don't know better, and they're basing their opinion more on what they think and they feel rather than what a bullet will do to an animal. So that's pretty important to understand. Another thing to understand about moose, when you see them get shot, is they usually don't just fall over. It's almost always pretty undramatic. If you're careful about your shot angle, no matter what caliber you're shooting, you should be. Just wait for like a clear double lung shot. You shoot a moose through the lungs, they'll sometimes run a little ways and stop, or if they're walking, sometimes they'll lock up, but they usually don't go far, and they'll stand there and they'll tip over. And there doesn't seem to be any correlation with caliber. I mean, I've shot them from everything from now a 22 arc through a 338 Lapua, and it's just kind of luck of the draw whether they might stand there for 2 seconds and fall over, or you might shoot them and they'll run away and stand there for a minute and a half. Anything in that range is kind of normal, and it's not good or bad. You can't base a cartridge's effectiveness on the reaction of an individual animal because there's so many variables. But if you shoot them good through the lungs or the heart, like, they're not going to last long, and it's going to kill them quickly. The other thing about moose, because they tend to stand there or run a little ways and stop, I would say, all the moose I've killed and seen killed, most of the time they get shot more than one time, no matter what the caliber you're using. I mean, I've killed several with one shot, but it's not, this is where it gets a little funky too, because people who don't like the idea of using small calibers if you shoot a moose 3 times with your 300 Win Mag, he's tough. But if you do the same with a 22 arc, then you were undergunned and being irresponsible and all this nonsense. But that's just how it is. Most moose get shot more than one time, and they're really not that hard to kill. Most of those shots are not necessary, but it's not a bad idea to put another shot in an animal if he's still standing there and up on his feet, just for insurance, because you ultimately don't know exactly what that bullet is doing every single shot you take. So after doing a bunch of shooting and reloading and kind of plugging people for information who had shot big game with this similar card with the 22 arc and similar cartridges, I decided on the 88 grain ELD match, and that scratches a couple itches for me because there's definitely been some increased data gathering using some match bullets, and with a lot of positive results. So I kind of wanted to see what that would do. So I'll be honest, like, I had some trepidation going into the hunt, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it and asking myself, like, am I being objective, or am I just going off what I feel? And I think a lot of these feelings of, man, is this really enough? Is this going to work? Are based on, it's like almost like a deep-seated trauma of being told year after year that you got to have bigger, that's not going to work. It's marginal. And rather than just basing my decision on what can be observed and repeated and whatnot. So, going back and forth, talking to people who have recently used it on a variety of pretty big and tough game and having great results, I felt confident enough, obviously, that I was going to use it. So, but I was really eager just to see how that would pan out. I mean, my opportunity came just in the blink of an eye. We'd been hunting for 9 days. So we'd been out there hunting for a while. Yeah.
Whoa. 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 Whoa.
My buddy, my hunting partner and I alternate year after year, so he had first dibs this year. He shot a really big bull with his 308.
I heard the bullet hit him.
Oh, dude, I drilled him in the lungs.
Nice.
Perfect. I thought, I kept thinking, I got all these hoods on, and I thought I heard something. And I was like, oh, he would have.
Well, I thought,
heard something.
I kept like thinking I was hearing stuff too, but like you could never be, I could
I
never
just
be.
was like, all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a fucking huge moose standing there. I was like, holy shit. He's like 80 yards away. He saw me because I had to get my gun out.
Yeah.
And then it was my turn. And after a few days of hunting for me, you know, basically all of a sudden, like turn around and there's a bull right there. And he was about 170 yards or so. And shortly after we saw him, he stepped behind some trees, and we'd been calling, like we're totally dependent on calling these moose in. So, you know, my buddy climbed down the ladder, and I'm sitting in an elevated stand. My buddy calls a little bit and then comes back up. And I don't know, the bull wasn't going to play with us. He wasn't having it. So he, after a couple minutes, took off walking basically perpendicular to us, broadside. And you could tell he was headed. And I had a window where he was going to, you know, walking through this finger of brush that he was visible. And it was not an easy shot, or like really an ideal shot that I would like to have. But as he's going through there, I scanned ahead of him and found a window that would line up, you know, that his chest cavity would pass by as he was walking, and held on that. And as soon as he stepped into there, I touched one off, and I kind of expected him to stop and seize up. You know, the bull before had just like stood there basically that my buddy shot. But it almost like he almost lost his hind end. So his butt drops and he springs up and takes off running. And he wouldn't have run very far, but at that point, you know, there's like no recoil. So the moose is still on the scope, and he takes off running, quartering away. And I just pan and hold, you know, kind of back edge of his shoulder and touch another one off and hit him. And then he stops, and I touch another one off and hit him. Heard all three bullets hit him. And he stands there for maybe it was another 30 seconds. I think he fell down 40 seconds after the first shot and was dead.
Okay, I'm ready whenever. If you got a clear shot. Oh. Lots of brush. You're gonna want to do it. He's done. He's gonna go down right there. Boom. Yeah, dude. All right.
So then what I've been waiting for is to get this kind of post-mortem report. We go over and yank the guts out, and I see two holes in his ribs. And after watching the video and kind of getting back and butchering up all the meat, I got, you know, the full details. So the first shot hit him basically perfectly. Hit him right smack dab in the middle of a rib, and tore off like that near lung lobe, and put a hole about the size of a baseball between the lungs. If you have the lungs and you spread them apart, there's a hole about the size of a baseball between the lungs, and then that bullet terminated in the offside lung. And I mean, that right there would have been enough to kill him. I think if I made a mistake in the whole deal, it was shooting 3 times or shooting twice, because I really didn't need to. But sometimes it's best just to take extra shots if you think you may need to. We found 2 of 3 hits so far, pulling the guts out, and both like through the rib cage. One was a complete pass through. Like, I don't know if that was the first shot, kind of low lungs, and just both, I think this is first 1 and 2 or whatever, kind of obliterated those corners of the lungs. And then there was, that's an exit through one lung. So like, it's not crazy, but like pretty impressive damage and penetration. I feel like there was a, yeah, there's
another, yeah, I found another spot inside there.
In there where this, yeah, thing just got pulverized. Yep, you can't survive that. Shot number 2, as the video shows, hit him. I didn't lead him at all. I mean, was making decisions quick, and that's one I wish I could take back. I hit him right in the biggest, beefiest part of the meat of the hind quarter, and it instantly like just killed that leg, and he stopped. After we were cutting him up, I finally found that hole, because I didn't see where I'd hit him, and you know, stuff's happening fast. I didn't notice his leg go out from him. So I'm kind of my own worst critic when it comes to that. Like, I hate ruining any moose meat. I don't think people should be shooting them in the shoulders or the hindquarters, obviously. So like, that second shot was a mistake. But that being said, it was interesting to see what that bullet did. So after about 1 inch of penetration through, I mean, like thickest part of the rump hide into the meat of the hind quarter, it put about a racquetball sized hole for 10 inches until it hit the femur, and it totally shattered the top of the femur. And a moose femur is big, man. They're like that big around. It is a huge chunk of bone. So it was objectively pretty impressive to see, like, after that much penetration, that bullet still did that to that bone. Fortunately, I didn't lose near as much meat as I thought I was going to when I first noticed that. So that was a good thing. But yeah, I'm not proud of shooting him in the butt. So third shot, after he stopped, impacted just a couple ribs over from the first shot, and it blew a pretty big hole through the ribs, which when I looked at it initially, I thought that probably hit a twig and tumbled, because the first shot I had a totally clear window, and after that I didn't, and I just kind of held and shot. So and I'm like 99% sure that's what happened, because the bullet went through the ribs, tore off about like a 6-inch long. I mean, the tear in the bottom of the lobe of the lungs was like 6 inches long, and then went through the lungs, exited about the size of a golf ball through the opposite lung, and ended up in the offside shoulder. It was right up against the scapula. I cut it out of there, and the bullet, sure enough, was like flattened out and twisted, and it hadn't actually opened. It, you know, went in backwards or sideways or whatever it did to really flatten it out like that. Again, like, that's not something we want to see happen, but it's good, interesting data to me anyway, because sometimes you hit a stick you don't see. And this is with any caliber. Like, shooting a 30 caliber or 338 does not make you any less or any more immune to shooting brush. I mean, I've tested this stuff out, and basically, unless you're shooting a 45-70, like any caliber of bullet will deflect and tumble dramatically when you hit like even small sticks and twigs. So it was interesting to see that, even though that was kind of a worst case scenario for that bullet, man, if it had been a deer-sized animal, that would have blown out the opposite side of its shoulder, and I'd have been patting myself on the back for how good it did. So I've got my moose. He's packed up in the freezer, and now I'm going to recommend everybody go get a 22 ARC to go moose hunting with, right? Nah, not quite. The natural question after doing this is, would I recommend a 22 ARC for moose hunting? And the answer is no, but it's not really why most people are going to assume. Now, like, people are saying, I gotcha, you know, like if you're looking at it objectively, like the 22 ARC 88 grain ELDM did plenty of damage, plenty of penetration. Like, it's got what you need to kill a moose cleanly and effectively and ethically all day long. If you're shooting at reasonable ranges within reasonable parameters, like, it's got enough to do the job. But it doesn't offer like compelling advantages over a little bit bigger cartridges that are really good moose killers too. You know, like a 308 that my buddy used, shot his bull with this year. You choose a good bullet, it doesn't recoil that much, and you'll kill any moose that walks the face of the planet with it. And really, you know, when you're picking a cartridge, all these other details matter way more than the cartridge you choose. You know, your shooting ability, how much you can practice, you know, your bullet selection and the parameters in which you shoot an animal matter way more than cartridge. You know, people just use big cartridges as a band-aid to make them feel better and more confident, but it's really like false confidence. Yeah, sure, like, you know, a huge cartridge does work great, but it doesn't write off your responsibility to kind of handle all the periphery and all the other details of shooting accurately and ethically. So from what I saw on my moose, I would be totally confident using the 22 ARC on basically any deer-sized game. And I think that's really where it's gonna live, in that 243 Winchester crossover varmint to medium-sized big game rifle. You know, like a 243 is totally sufficient for moose. Like a lot of moose get killed with a 243, but it's not ideal for that. With efficient bullets, I think it offers some nice advantages on deer-sized game. I think at reasonable ranges, it'd be a great black bear gun. I think like there's a lot of reasons for me to be excited about this in that space, and I'm really excited to try different bullets and just kind of see what I can get out of it and see. I think the 22 ARC has a pretty bright future.